DRE is not an all or nothing thing. The drug influence evaluation is not an all or nothing thing. It is a cobbling together of different techniques, which may or may not be indicative, which may or may not be admissible. But to say that the overall technique is reliable, the statistics just don't support it. And Judge Lisa's statistical analysis is pretty wide of the mark.
I think you should take a position too, John, that all right, there's 12 steps, okay? And if each one of them is done perfectly, that's something for the judge to think about. But when you start taking out 2 and 3 and 4 of the steps where you have no evidence at all, or the evidence is, exculpatory, it's more likely in municipal court that you're just going to be missing pieces of the puzzle. How many pieces of the puzzle do you have to be missing before you say, look, it's not admissible, okay? It just should not be there.
Look, also keep in mind, Bob, one of the assumptions is that not only are all drugs the same, which they're not all people are the same. There are people who are taking prescription medications. Of course, it's going to show up since the state lab only tests for presence, not quantity.
Right.
People are different ages. They have different physical abilities. And these are all variables that cannot be controlled by employing a single technique. Aspects of this DRE protocol may indicate certain things, but they're not dispositive. It's like any time you're arguing proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to analyze the case. You break it down into its component parts, show how each of these components are not necessarily indicative of impairment, but then you have to re-synthesize those parts to show that even in combination, they don't necessarily prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
You know what, Johnny? Synthesize is exactly the right word, because you got me thinking about marijuana. And for an inveterate marijuana smoker who gives a urine sample, what does that prove? I mean, I would suspect that there would be ketones showing up in the urine sample for days, weeks, a month. What does that prove?
And you're right. You're 100% correct. Someone who's a novice marijuana user or occasional user may feel the effects more significantly than someone who uses it on a regular basis. Whereas a regular user may feel relaxed. The occasional user may feel, whoa, I'm a little high here and not having as much control.
I mean, in the context of the forensic evidence, all right? You have a defendant who's stupid enough to voluntarily give a urine sample, and it comes back positive for THC. What does that prove?
Well, I got to tell you, usually what you see in a marijuana case is it comes back for something called carboxy THC or COOH THC. I recently had a DRE trial where the best expert for the defense was a very experienced state's chemist, an unusual chemist because she had a PhD and had some training in pharmacology. And her testimony was, yep, this guy used marijuana, but his urine sample is positive for a non-impairing substance. And I got to tell you, when I brought this out on cross, the judge had never heard this before. He jumped out of his chair. He basically repeated my cross, got all the same answers. And it turned out now I had affirmative evidence that based on the state's evidence, my guy did not have an impairing substance in his body at the time the sample was taken.
The point I'm trying to make here is that when you're going through these 12 steps, again, you may be missing them because of non-cooperation or exercise of Miranda rights or no forensic evidence.
Let's consider this example. Some guy's been taking Ambien and Flexerol, for example, very common prescription medications for a long period of time. And they do toxicology and they show up for the presence of Ambien or Flexerol. Putting aside the other evidence, how is this relevant to a theory that a person's impaired if it's going to always show up in their system all the time?